Welcome back to the Daily Crypto Roundup. Right now, AI is already trading crypto, and that alone is a major shift in how this market operates. But the real question that most people are not asking yet is much bigger than that. It is not just about what AI is doing. It is about who controls it, how it is structured, and what rules it operates under. Because once you move beyond the idea of machines participating in a market and start to think about the systems those machines exist inside, you begin to realize that this is not just a technological shift, it is a structural one. Over the last 24 hours, we have seen a development that on the surface looks simple, almost easy to ignore. But underneath that simplicity sits a much larger implication. The World Project, led by Sam Altman, has partnered with Coinbase to begin building a system designed to verify that there is a real human behind transactions made by AI. At first glance, that sounds like a technical solution to a technical problem, but when you slow down and think about what that actually means, it becomes clear that this is not just about verification, it is about control. To understand why this matters, you need to look at where the market is heading next. AI is not just going to assist traders, it is going to act independently. It is going to open wallets, execute trades, move capital, interact with decentralized protocols, and do all of that at a scale and speed that no human can realistically match. That creates a situation where the number of active participants in the market could increase dramatically, not because more people are entering, but because more machines are operating. And that introduces a fundamental problem. If you have millions of AI agents interacting with the market simultaneously, how do you distinguish between real human activity and automated behavior? How do you prevent manipulation, spam, or synthetic activity from overwhelming the system? And perhaps more importantly, how do you maintain any sense of trust in a system where you cannot easily verify who or what is behind a transaction? This is exactly the issue that analysts have started to highlight as AI becomes more integrated into financial systems. One research analyst in digital assets recently described this as the emergence of synthetic market participation, where a significant portion of activity is generated by machines rather than humans. And the concern here is not just volume, it is behavior. Because machines do not behave like humans. They do not hesitate, they do not react emotionally, and they do not follow narratives in the same way. They operate based on data, optimization, and execution. If that type of behavior becomes dominant, the nature of the market changes. Price movements become more efficient but also more aggressive. Trends can accelerate faster, but they can also reverse without warning. And the gap between those who understand what is happening and those who do not becomes much wider. This is where the idea of identity comes in, and this is why the partnership between Altman's World Project and Coinbase is so important. What they are effectively building is a layer that sits on top of the market, a system that can verify whether a participant is human or not. In practical terms, this means creating a form of digital identity that can be linked to transactions, allowing systems to distinguish between organic human activity and automated AI behavior. On paper, that sounds like a logical step. If you cannot tell the difference between humans and machines, then adding a layer that allows you to do that seems like a solution. But the moment you introduce identity into a system like crypto, you change its structure in a very fundamental way. Because crypto was originally designed to be permissionless. Anyone could participate, anyone could transact, and no central authority was required to verify identity or grant access. The introduction of identity shifts that model. It introduces the idea that participation may require verification, that access may depend on proving who you are, and that transactions may be linked to identity in ways that were not originally intended. And that raises a much bigger question, which is not just about technology, but about philosophy and direction. Who controls identity? Because if identity becomes a requirement for participation, then whoever controls the identity layer effectively controls access to the system. They determine who can participate, how they participate, and under what conditions. And that is a significant amount of power. This is where the debate becomes more complex, because there are valid arguments on both sides. On one side, there is the argument that identity is necessary, that without it, the system becomes vulnerable to abuse, that AI could overwhelm networks with activity, manipulate markets, and create instability. From this perspective, identity is not about control. It is about stability and scalability. Several analysts have already suggested that identity layers could become as important as liquidity layers in the next phase of crypto, acting as a mechanism to ensure that systems remain functional as they scale. In other words, if crypto is going to support a future where AI plays a major role, then some form of verification may be unavoidable. But on the other side, there is a very different concern. Because once you introduce identity, you introduce the possibility of gatekeeping. You introduce the idea that participation is no longer unconditional, that access can be restricted, and that the system can be shaped by those who control its infrastructure. And this is where things start to resemble the traditional financial system. A system where access is controlled, where identity is required, and where participation is subject to rules defined by central entities. And for many people in crypto, that is exactly what the technology was supposed to move away from. So what you are seeing here is not just a technical development, it is a directional one. It is a signal that crypto may be evolving into something different from what it originally was. Not necessarily better or worse, but different. Now, bringing this back to the market itself, this shift has real implications. Because if identity becomes part of the system, then the way platforms operate changes. The way transactions are verified changes. The way users interact with the system changes. And over time, the entire structure of the market adapts to that new reality. And this connects directly back to what we discussed in the first episode. If AI is already operating in the market, and identity is being introduced to manage it, then what you are seeing is the early formation of a new framework. A framework where AI drives activity, identity verifies participation, and crypto acts as the underlying financial layer. When you combine those three elements, you are no longer just looking at a market. You are looking at infrastructure. The kind of infrastructure that defines how systems operate at scale. And this is the key point that needs to be understood. This is not just a partnership, and it is not just a feature. It is the beginning of a system that could shape how crypto evolves over the next decade. Because once systems like this are established, they tend to become embedded. They become part of the foundation, and changing them becomes increasingly difficult over time. So the question is not whether this will have an impact. The question is how much of the future system it will define. And that leads us to the next step in this series, because if AI is operating and identity is verifying, then the next question becomes even more important. What happens when AI starts acting independently? Not just executing trades, but making decisions, managing capital, and interacting with the system in ways that go beyond simple automation. Because at that point, you are no longer just dealing with tools, you are dealing with participants. And that is where things start to get even more interesting. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those topics where the implications go far beyond what most people are thinking about right now. Like and follow, and we will see you at the top.